NitroJen and welcome to my garden. Today's session on bubbles is likely to get a bit messy, so it's one we want to do outside. Bubbles are a fantastic way of exploring and having a great time with science, and it's really cheap to make our own bubble solution and we don't need much equipment to do it. During today's session, I'm going to share with you my favourite bubble recipes to make giant bubbles, bouncing bubbles and even square bubbles. So let's get started. To follow along with these experiments today, you're going to need a container large enough to hold 2 litres of water, some water, some washing up liquid, and I highly recommend an unscented washing up liquid, so plain, original and fairy branded works the best. Some glycerol. This does help to make our bubbles more elasticated, so if you have got any glycerol around the house that you might use in icing, then that's a really good one to find. Going to need a measuring jug, some measuring spoons, so a teaspoon or a half teaspoon, something to stir with, so a big spoon, some straws and some pipe cleaners, or if you've not got any pipe cleaners you can use garden wire or you can use string. A highlighter pen that you don't mind ruining or a pen ink that you don't mind using, and some stretchy clean gloves, and they do need to be clean and dry. The simplest of bubble solutions just involve water, fairy liquid and some glycerol, and this will make some pretty strong bubbles. In order to make giant bubble liquid we will need some extra additives, so keep an eye out for that recipe coming up later in the video. So here I've got 2 litres of water and I'm just going to pour it out into my container. Now you'll notice that if we try to make any bubbles with water, it's not particularly stretchy, and that's because water has an invisible film over the top called surface tension, and this is how little insects can sit on top of the water on top of that surface tension. What we need to do is to lower this surface tension and break up the bonds in the water, and we need soap in order to do this. So to do 2 litres of water, I'm adding 40 millilitres of washing up liquid, and I'm going to stir it in very slowly and very gently. What we want to do is to make sure that our mixture is really well mixed, but we don't want to create loads of tiny bubbles or foam on the top, because this will play a role in making our bubbles. And then we're going to pour in 25 millilitres of glycerol and stir that in too. Now it is best if we leave our bubble solution overnight for those bonds to form between the water, and we'll get a stronger liquid the next day, but it's not a problem to use it after about an hour. So we're going to leave this to rest for about an hour and then come back to it. So I've given my basic bubble solution an hour just to rest and all those bonds to form between all of the chemicals in our solution. Let's see how stretchy it is. So I'm going to take a bubble wand and dip it in, and there we go, some bubbles. So our soap bubbles are really interesting. They always make this perfect circular sphere shape, and that's because it's the easiest shape for it to form with the amount of air it's trapping inside. Even wind is making my bubbles wet today. This is a bit of a breeze out here. Now if we make just the bubble film and look at the bubble film, we can see lots of little water droplets swirling and moving around, and this is the effect that the soap has on the bubbles. It actually protects the water. So it's actually making a sandwich, and if we were to look at it incredibly close up, we'd actually see it was in layers. There'd be 3 layers. So soap would form the bread of the sandwich and water would be protected in the middle layer. And that allows our water then to be stretchier and make these bubble films into soap bubbles. Now you'll notice that every time our bubble pops, it seems to disappear. And it's disappearing because of difference in temperature, humidity, so the amount of water vapour in the air, and whether it comes into contact with something that's dirty or oily. Oil and water don't get on very well, as we know, but soap is also a dispersant and it can break up the bonds between oil and water and mix them together. But in this case, our hands are oily and our hands make the bubbles pop. So if we wanted to be able to touch a bubble, we'd have to have something that was incredibly clean and dry to protect the bubble from the oils in our skin. So to make a bubble bounce, we would need a pair of gloves. So here I have a clean pair of gloves on my hands. I can take a bubble and we can get it to bounce on the glove. So we can blow a bubble onto our glove and we can get our bubble to bounce. Yay, one bubble bouncing. So why are bubbles sphere? What is it about a bubble that makes it always round? Is it the bubble wand? Does that make a difference? Well, let's see. A round bubble wand makes a round bubble. But what about a heart-shaped bubble wand? Ah, it still makes a round bubble. What about a star-shaped wand? It still makes a round bubble. This is all to do with the air that's actually being pushed inside of the bubble. It's trying to make the easiest shape for the pressure to be the same on the inside of the bubble as it is on the outside. And a sphere is the easiest shape for it to make. So no matter what bubble-shaped wand you have, you'll always end up with a sphere-shaped bubble. However, there is a way that we can make a cube shape or even square bubble using a square net. So instead of having a 2D shape like our heart bubble wand here, we've got a 3D net shape. So this is a cubic shape, and this will allow us to make a cube-shaped bubble. And what we're going to do is we're going to dip it into the bubble liquid, and as we pull it up, we need every surface of our cube net to be covered in a bubble film. And then we can get the surface to form in the middle as the sides come together. There we go. Then we're going to need to take a straw and dip one end of the straw into the bubble liquid so that when we put it into the bubble it's not going to pop. And we're going to make a bubble inside of our cube frame. And there we have the cubed bubble. So a cube-shaped bubble doesn't just work with a cube-shaped net. In fact, you could make a triangular pyramid net and get it to work similarly. So once again, we need all sides of the frame to be covered with a soap film and then blow a bubble into the centre. A triangular shaped bubble. So you can experiment with other shaped nets and see what shape bubble can be formed in the centre. And this is all to do with the fact that the bubble film is being forced on the surfaces of the frame that we're making, and it's trying to be the simplest shape in the middle. In fact, this is a great way in which designers and architects can look at the surfaces for roof canopies. If they create a structure that they want to fill out with a particular material that's elasticated, then they can see what shape or what form it will take by using a bubble solution. The bubble film will take the easiest shape possible between the different areas of the frame, and then you can have a look and see what shape will be the most efficient to cover that surface. If you'd like to have a go at making your own cube bubble, you're going to need to create a cubic net like this one here. But you can make it out of straws and pipe cleaners. So you're going to need to take 4 straight straws and 4 pipe cleaners. We're going to take our 4 straws and we're going to cut them into 3 even lengths, so we end up with 12 in total, which will make all of the squares that we need on the side to build a cube. So you can measure your straws, or you can cut them by eye and adjust them afterwards. So I'm just going to measure by eye. So I'm just checking that the lengths of the straws are roughly equal. If any are a few off, we can just give them a little trim. There we go. And we're going to start by taking a pipe cleaner and threading 4 of the straws onto the pipe cleaner to make our first square. Like this. We're just going to bring the ends together and twist. Then we're going to take a second pipe cleaner and we're going to thread it through the end of one of the straws all the way through, and we're then going to add on a straw to either side. We want to finish this square off to make our second square, so I'm going to pull through the pipe cleaner to make it slightly longer on this side to add the second piece of straw on. Like this. And then we can bend that round to make the second square. And we're going to do the same process again with our third pipe cleaner, threading it through, putting on a piece of straw on that end and 2 pieces of straw on the other end. And then just twisting the ends off like this. So this is enough to have built up 3 of the sides of our cube. And now we just have to complete it with the top part. So we're going to take our 4th pipe cleaner and again thread that through the end. Take one of the straws and put it on one end, another straw on the other. And we want to bring this side round, so we're just going to fold up the sides, pull in the straws and tie this one off. And finally we're going to leave one end in order to hold our cube net, and we can trim off the other ends with the scissors. And then you can test out your cube net in your bubble liquid. If you'd like to have a go at using bubbles to create a bit of artwork, then you can take a highlighter pen or an ink pen that's got washable ink inside, so that it will dissolve in our bubble liquid, and you're going to take out the little fibre tube that's inside that holds most of the ink. I'm going to leave it soaking in some bubble liquid. So this is what we've done here, and I'm just going to top it up with a bit more bubble liquid. So we've got 4 different inks here that have soaked in the bubble liquid so that they're nice and inky, and I'm going to make it really bubbly with a big foam like this. And I'm going to take a piece of paper and I'm going to pop the bubbles using the paper, and it should just leave enough of the ink on the paper there behind as the bubbles pop. And if you have lots of different inks, you can build up different layers. And here I've got a bubbly picture. To make some mega bubbles, we need some added ingredients into our bubble liquid, and I'm going to start my solution from scratch rather than topping up the normal bubble solution. Again, we're going to take 2 litres of water. I'm going to pour it into my bucket, and to it I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of bicarbonate of soda. So just make sure they're quite level, and I'm just going to let that dissolve and mix it in. Next I'm going to add the fairy liquid, and we need 150 ml of fairy liquid. Again, we want to pour that in slowly like we did with our other bubble solution, trying to make the minimum amount of foam on top as possible. So that's 100, and then we'll take another 50. For 150. Okay. Giving it a good mix as we go. Then we're going to add glycerol, and this time we need 100 millilitres of glycerol, but I split mine into 2 lots of 50, so I'm going to pour half out each time. Now, instead of adding them straight in, we're going to add our additives at this point to the glycerol first, and this is really important because the additives that we're using usually have quite a cohesive effect to liquids. For example, one of the powders we're using is called Tylo powder, or CMC, and this is a type of powder that gets used to make icing nice and shiny if you're making models out of icing for cake decorations. And we're going to use 1/4 of a teaspoon, so it's a really small amount. We don't want to add it straight into our solution or it'll end up clumping together. What we're going to do is use the glycerol, which is a really thick and viscous liquid, to disperse all of the individual parts of the powder, and then we can get it to dissolve in. So I've added the Tylo powder inside of half the glycerol, so that's 1/4 of a teaspoon in 50 ml of glycerol, and giving it a really good mix to make sure it gets dispersed all the way through the glycerol. And then we're just going to pour it into our solution and give that a stir. Then to the other half of the glycerol, we're going to add 2 more ingredients. So xanthan gum, and a xanthan gum is again a type of thickener that gets used in baking and cooking. And again, we're going to need just 1/4 of a teaspoon. So we want to add that straight into the glycerol and give it a stir again so that it gets dispersed through the glycerol. And our last ingredient is polyox, and polyox is a really long polymer, a really long chain, and it helps give the thick elasticity that we need to support the bubbles to make giant bubbles. We need a very small amount of polyox because otherwise it makes it too viscous. So we're literally going to use 1/8 of a teaspoon. And again, we want that to get mixed in really well with the glycerol before it goes into our solution, or it'll end up clumping together. And then we can pour it in. And give it a gentle mix. Now you're going to need to mix this for a couple of minutes until it's really well mixed throughout and everything's got distributed. Again, this would be best if it was left for a few hours or even overnight for all the bonds between all of these chemicals to get stronger, but an hour would do. So we've left the giant bubble mixture to sit for a little while, and I'm going to give it another mix just to make sure it's not separated. We can see it is definitely stringy and gloopier than our normal bubble mixture. Now what's interesting with this bubble mixture is because the solution's thicker, we actually get to see more colours coming off of the light. So as we create these bubbles, we can see all the beautiful colours getting diffracted from the light. The thicker that liquid is, the brighter these bubbles colours are. And these colours are coming from the sun and the light bouncing back from the edges of the bubbles, breaking it up into all those bright rainbow colours. Now, as a bubble starts to get thinner and a thinner surface and a thinner skin, it will get darker, and that's usually just before the bubble's about to pop. Now we can make much bigger bubbles with our mega bubble solution. So we're going to need a bigger bubble wand. So here I have a larger bubble wand, and I'm going to pour my bubble liquid into this tray. And then we can make huge bubble films. These extra ingredients make our bubbles just that little bit more stretchy, so that our bubble film can be even bigger. Whoa! Now you don't need a special tray or a special bubble wand like this. You can just use a bucket, some string and some sticks, and I'll show you how. Here's a bucket, some sticks and a bit of string. Now I've used a particular string that is fully cotton because this allows it to absorb the liquid really well, and that will make larger, stretchier bubbles. If you do have cotton based string, that would be preferable, or wool even. Synthetic rope or string will make it a little bit harder to do, but not impossible. Now to the ends of the sticks I've added a couple of eyelet holes. You don't necessarily have to do that. If you can just tie it on, or you can tape it on to the end. And I've just made a circular shape. So you can see on the string we've got a limited length at the top and then a longer length at the bottom dangling free. If you're using a lighter weight string or rope than this one, you might find that you're going to need a bit of weight to dangle at the bottom. So you're going to need something that's reasonably heavy with a hole in, so a washer works really well, just to thread that onto the string and dangle at the bottom. So I'm going to leave my sticks into the liquid for a little while to soak up as much of this liquid as possible, and then we'll see the size bubbles we can create. It's quite windy today, so I'm not going to need to drag my bubble liquid far. I'm just going to hold my string out open and allow the air to blow through it. Whoa! So I'm just walking back with my bubble net open, and you can see we can make really long bubbles. But if you want to close off a bubble so that you can make it complete and round, as you're walking back with the string open, we're just going to pull it tight in together again just to close the bubble off. So you need to open it up, drag it back, and then close it off again, and you should be able to form a giant bubble. I hope you had fun exploring bubbles with me today. Just remember that the floor can get quite slippy where the bubble liquid's been, so just be careful if it gets slippery. Bubbles are really good fun to play with. You can get creative with how big a bubble you can make. Maybe you can fit a whole person inside of a bubble. Have fun and enjoy exploring the science of bubbles. But bubbles are limitless, so you'll have an endless amount of fun. Bye for now.